She thumps a cane and drinks champagne. She's formidable and judgmental, but we can guarantee that she's a quintessential Lady D, but recognizes great potential. What would Danbury do?
Welcome to What Would Danbury Do, your guide to Julia Quinn's Bridgerton series from A to V. We wanted to take a second to pause and reflect on the Bridgerton bonanza that has been the past 8 episodes and answer some of your questions. Don't forget, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as @BridgertonPod. We love hearing from you. Tweet us using the hashtag WWDDpod. I had 2 different friends send me a message about the female friendship discussion. Just like all caps, quotation marks, who hurt you, and...
Is this where we said we didn't know?
Or hurt all of us?
Who hurt me? Who hurt me,
you.
Rudy? Kate yelled it at me when I talked about Hermione and Lucy's friendship. They thought it was the funniest thing because they were just like, we were all... Yeah, so I've had 2 different friends contact me to be like, just kind of flag, like, the dynamic between Hermione and Lucy is very much how I am as a friend. And they were like, oh, okay.
Oh.
But we all thought it was really funny.
Who hurt you?
Yeah. So, so you're causing ripples.
Ripples in Rudy's social circles.
In my friends. Look, they all know that I number my friends. There's a hierarchy.
Oh my god! Wow. Do they know their number? Oh
Yeah.
my god!
Sometimes I call them by their number to their face. I'll be like, okay, number 3.
Oh my god, can you imagine if Violet did that to my kids?
So, and look, my current number 3, she's moved up. Like, she used to be 6.
Rudy, I really adore you, but are you sure you're not a psychopath?
I'm not sure that I'm not a psychopath.
I mean...
It's a system that develops, and I guarantee other people do it. They just don't necessarily know that they're doing it. Like, when you think about... You're having like a bit of a day, and you're like, I really need to talk to somebody. I need to talk to a friend. Like, there is a hierarchy of who you ring. Like, who are you going to
call?
call?
But you don't let them know the hierarchy.
I do.
Oh, yeah, I can't tell if you're either a genius or just really horrible.
I don't know either.
I don't ever think of my friends in, like, a hierarchy of, like, their importance to me. I do think about, like, if something happens, who's the best person to talk to with that circumstance? Like, who's got the best skill set or way of talking to me that will get me to a better place. But I don't ever think of them as a hierarchy.
So Rudy ranks her friends, and Adele considers their resumes.
See? I'm not the only, like, there's, yeah.
I can be similarly brutal, though, like, if I don't give people a lot of chances, like, I'm just done.
So, like, yeah, number 3 and number... She's going to be so excited because she probably doesn't realize that she's that high up. Number 2 and number 3 both.
The person who thought they were 3 and has realized they've dropped. Jesus.
Oh, she knows what she did.
Wow.
It became a much sort of more acknowledged joke when I moved away from Sydney for just under a year. Because I really do. I was living. I was living away from Sydney. My social circle was like kind of was really small, and so I really heavily relied on phone calls to people, to like my friends back home, and it became, it became a running joke because I absolutely had an order in which I placed phone calls. And so, like, I would call one person, and if they didn't pick up, then that was the next on the list. And it was the same order every time. And, like, I think it was one of them who was like, oh, I'm surprised you called me. I went, yeah, I know, but, like my first 4 people didn't answer. And then, like, and then we kind of... It became, because they're all friends with each other as well, so it became sort of a thing. Like, everyone realized.
I'm super aghast right now.
Everyone realized that there's an order, and we all worked out what the rank was, and kind of the beautiful thing.
This is something Lady Danbury would do.
I told you I love her.
I'm so deeply, deeply uncomfortable right now.
Well, like, because
Kate and I have not asked our status in the...
No, are you kidding? I don't want to know.
Well, for a little while, I was like number 1 on one person's list, and they were, 6 on mine, and it just is what it is. Anyway, so I thought that you guys would enjoy learning, like, that little bit of...
I think I'm going to be processing this for a week.
Yeah.
I actually might ask my... No, I'm not even going to bring this up with my friends.
I would not
be brought up with
I was going to say, I would not encourage anyone to have this conversation with their friends unless they are very sure that they can hack it.
I am soft and swishy, and I have no shell. I cannot manage this. I can even hear about other people finding out that they're no longer number 3. I'm actively bleeding right now.
I'm also aware I'm the friend that you don't choose to be a bridesmaid. So, like, I already know I'm lower down, like, most of the time. So, I'm good.
One of the reasons that my friendship group is what it is because we all have a pretty rough way of talking to each other. Like, we aggressively love each other.
You assertively love each other.
Yeah. So, who hurt me? I don't know, but I hurt a lot of people, maybe.
Hi, I'm Adele.
Hi, I'm Rudy.
And I'm Kate. We thought that season 1 was over when we finished reading On the Way to the Wedding, but it turns out that we had more to say.
Would you like to start by answering at least one of our listener questions?
I think there's a really good one to start with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to use initials. We didn't ask for permission to use people's names, so I'm just going to say this came from listener K, who asked, what would your ranking of the series be, best to worst?
I think the way that I did this is I knew my top 3 and I knew my bottom 3, and then and then by default there's 2 in the middle.
The ones you forgot are in the middle.
Well, I'd be interested in knowing what your top 3 are.
Okay, so Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. Although I think that's changing, and I think that the reread is why it's changing. It's In His Kiss, When He Was Wicked, The Viscount Who Loved Me, The Duke and I, To Sir Philip with Love, On the Way to the Wedding, and then,
Bloody Benedict.
Which, like, it's that book I consistently skip in my, like, when I read the series, I actually skip over. And it's also the only one out of my set of print books that is, it doesn't match, because I bought it at a used bookstore. Like, the completionist in me needed to have all 8 books, but I didn't care enough to buy it new and in the cover that the rest of them, because I actually have the UK covers.
Oh, wow.
So they're cartoony
kind of
ones.
Yeah. They're lovely covers, the UK versions.
Yeah, so, because when I bought the first book that I bought for myself, I actually was on a holiday in London. And so I bought it from a UK bookstore. I bought 2, and then I decided to get the rest of them, and I wanted all my covers to match, but I did not care about An Offer for a Gentleman, which I had already read at the library. So, like, I'd read all of the series. Yeah, anyway. Over explaining here, but there's a reason that we had to do more than one take of our outro for that episode, where I kept misnaming the next book. And I jumped straight from The Viscount Who Loved Me to Romancing Mr. Bridgerton.
Well, this is an interesting discussion because, and this comes into a question that we had later on about what our favorite scenes are. And I think that there is a difference between what is the best book and what is my favorite book, and potentially even what is the best book and what is the most effective book. And
can you tell who's the editor?
Well, I mean, and that's the thing, like, books hit different people for different reasons. It's why it's such a wonderful kaleidoscope of books that work for you that don't always work for everybody. But like, I think that I would say that the best book is When He Was Wicked, but that's not my favorite. But I think arguably, and we've certainly heard from enough people over the course of this podcast to say that When He Was Wicked might also be the most effective book. With all of that introduction and all those caveats I just put into place, I'm going to give you my favorites as opposed to what I think are the best. Because I think objectively, When He Was Wicked is the best, and To Sir Philip with Love is probably the least best of the series. But for me, my favorite is still Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. And I would probably put It's in His Kiss as second, and then When He Was Wicked in terms of the third. And then The Viscount Who Loved Me as number 4. On the Way to the Wedding is number 5. And then To Serve Up with Love 6, and then Bloody Benedict is my last choice.
I appreciate you both gave me time to write all the to work mine out and write all the names and titles down so I wouldn't get into a muddle. I just went favorites. When He Was Wicked, Francesca. 2, The Duke and I, Daphne, because I wouldn't have read the rest of the series if I didn't love that first one and everything that was set up in that one. 3 would have been Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. 4, The Viscount Who Loved Me, because I love Kate. Like, I love her so much. And it has a scene that is phenomenal. There's a few, actually. 5, To Sir Philip with Love, Eloise. 6 is Hyacinth. 7 is Gregory's On the Way to the Wedding. And 8 is An Offer from the Gentleman, Benedict. What we might do is we'll have a list of all our favourites in order, and we'll put it on our website so you can check it out.
So this listener actually put in about 4 questions in the same one. Now that we have completely muddled through her first question, she wants to know what our series What the Featherington moment is, and alternately, what the best scene of the series is for us.
Overall, What the Featherington. Like the biggest What the Featherington, or like the one that...
Well, it just says, what is your series, What the Featherington? So I imagine that we can interpret it any way that we'd like to.
I'm going to go What the Featherington in an angry sense. And that would be To Sir Philip with Love, when Philip tells Eloise to shut up and that she talks too much. That really angered me, and it has stuck with me. So I'm judging you, Philip.
My overall What the Featherington is the lack of extended family Bridgertons. Like, that, it fascinates me. Like, that they don't, as a family, they don't seem to have uncles and aunts and cousins yet who are in their life. I don't know if it's just, I mean, like, obviously kind of we're reading the parts of their life that are important to the narrative of their love story, but like, there's no sense that they have any familial connections within the ton. So in the last episode, in Gregory's episode, we were talking about the way that the series has like a lot of absent people. like, and they're absent because they've died, like, and then it's a very sort of, I can't think of the word right now. Anyway, like, it comes up in Disney all the time. Like, there's a lot of orphans or children without mothers type thing. And, you know, the Bridgertons as a series hinges on being, like, 8 children without a father, and it's just their mother. And, like, but the longer I think about that, the more I'm just like, yeah, just kind of this idea of, did no one step in and help Violet as a single, like, as a widowed mother of 8 children? Like, where are her husband's family or her family? Like, they just, you know, it, like,
and she wouldn't have been that old. She was 36, so
yeah, and
in
her
terms
eldest,
of her
eldest child is 18 and is taking the reins of, like who taught Anthony to be a Viscount? Obviously, he had been learning some elements of that role, but
not really. I mean, he would have been away at school, away at school and then away at university, so he wouldn't really have had his Viscount lessons.
Exactly, like, they would be incomplete. So,
yeah.
Like, who was helping him?
But I guess we have to remember that by the end of this series, they've established 18 separate characters. You've got all the couples, and then you've got Danbury and Violet. So that's a lot of juggling. So to introduce more, like, they've also got all the secondary characters on top of that. So that's a lot to actually manage. But yes, the fact that Violet was so alone is quite telling.
Well, I mean, that's yeah, so that's why that's my, the Featherington for the series overall. Like, it's not something that holds up to scrutiny.
It's interesting because it extends as well. Like, that thought extends because they don't have any close friends either. You don't really see them interacting with anybody except each other. I mean, Eloise has Penelope, of course, but then Penelope becomes Colin's love interest. So she's sort of a technical Bridgerton anyway. Realistically...
Same with Simon. Simon is Anthony's friend, but then he marries Daphne, so he's a, like, technical Bridgerton, although... Technical
Bridgerton as well. I mean, Kate's sister and Penelope's sister are really sort of the only secondary characters that have a life outside of just being not Bridgertons, for want of a better descriptor, because realistically everybody else sort of becomes a Bridgerton. It's like a binary state. You're either Bridgerton or not Bridgerton. And there's just
very
not a lot
exclusive club.
Well, there's just not a lot of not Bridgertons through the course of the series.
But they're Chekhov's Bridgerton. Like, like, if you show me a character, they have to become a Bridgerton by the end of the book. Kate, what's your overall...
I don't know that I actually have one. I mean, I think I have them through all of the books, but there was nothing that was sort of overarching over the series for me that stood out after my reread. Do you think Quinn wrote what our turn of the century women would do, or what 19th century women would do? How would millennial gals make different choices in the shoes of Hyacinth, Francesca, and Eloise?
See, because I have been thinking about this so much.
It's a great question.
I'm going to get a little bit, like, nerdy here, but there is a romance author / academic, Jen Halleck, and she writes about chronotopes, which is the way that a particular setting gets is built in fiction, and our understanding of those rules. And the more familiar you are with the conventions of that setting, the easier it is for writers to kind of jump into it, and the more we kind of build up this idea of what that is, and it becomes this kind of, it becomes this kind of fantasy version. And we've absolutely done that with sort of the 1800s England, even more particularly London. So, like, and it's why when people start to write against the chronotope, no matter how much research they've done, they will often have readers come back to them and say, that's not accurate. So it's things like the aggressive whiteness of Julia Quinn's version of England. So the aggressive whiteness of that space, the aggressive heteronormativity of that space, you know, like, it's not like black and brown people were invented post 1800s. Like, we existed in those spaces as well. And sometimes held positions of power. Was there a huge number of those people doing those, like, holding those positions of power? Maybe not. But there's a difference between zero and some. That's where these kinds of ideas start to get tricky, or like these sort of fictional settings start to get tricky, when we start to take that idea, like that chronotopus fact. We're like, no. So I think when Elle sort of asks about whether we thought Quinn was writing about women from our generation and sort of transposing them into this 1800s, like 19th century setting, or whether she was writing 19th century, like 19th century characters in a 19th century setting. Like, I guess my answer is Julia Quinn was writing into a version of Regency England that was created by authors like Georgette Heyer, which is to say it's an entirely fictional version of both history and place. And so as we continue this project, what's going to be fascinating to me is seeing if and how intersectionality, and let's be honest, the fact that Quinn's work is being adapted by a company run by a black woman, just how that changes Quinn's version of 1900s England. The second part of Elle's question was, how would millennial gals, I love the word gals, how would millennial gals make different choices in the shoes of someone like Hyacinth, Francesca, Eloise, etc.?
I think Eloise would have made a completely different decision if she was a millennial girl. I think she might have hooked up with Penelope and stolen her from Colin, as you outlaid, Rudy, or, you know, she could have just lived her life being a single gal in London doing whatever the hell she wanted. I think for Francesca, she would have been able to run the property by herself without a guy. I think there's definitely a lot of things that would have happened, but I would have been sad for Francesca not having Michael in her life. I
think that eventually, like, Michael and Francesca would have found their way to each other. I don't think that, I mean, like, there's an imperative on Francesca, and we did talk about this, that, like, she wanted to have children. She wanted a partner in life, and the chemistry and the heat between them, I think there's an inevitability in that. Or I'd like to think that there's an inevitability. And the fact that they knew each other. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it would be different if the only reason that they met was because she was, I don't know.
In a contemporary novel, she would have decided, I'm sick of waiting, I'm going to go and have a baby, get some sperm, I'm going to do it myself. And then that would have been the, like, catalyst for him to be like, no, you don't need someone else's sperm, you need mine. And then, like, it would have been that, like, catalyst for them hooking up.
Realistically, in a contemporary setting, the chances of her having a stillbirth are minimized. So
true.
Like, so it may have been that they were raising her child together.
No, you're so right. That would have been amazing. Any variation on Francesca and Michael is great.
I know that I said this in Hyacinth's episode, but I would like to think that she pursued some level of education before kind of doing the whole like looking for a husband type thing. Like, I just think that I firmly believe that she is someone who wanted that for herself. I mean, that's more like if I was writing the series. Oh, actually, while we're kind of on the subject of Eloise and Penelope and fan fiction, it didn't come in through official channels, but I did get one question from a friend who listens who asked, did we ever find any Penelope and Eloise fan fiction? And the answer is yes. One. And I read
Did you write it, Rudy?
I didn't. It's from 2016, and it came out of a prompt, and the idea is that everybody is aware that they are in love with each other except for them. Like, they're the last to clue in. And it's quite sweet. So it integrates scenes from the series into the fanfiction itself. It's a one-shot, like, it's a long one, but it's a one-shot. And then it kind of leaves it up to you to decide whether they go off and get married due to compulsory heteronormativity. This is like in the words of the author. So whether it's because of compulsory heteronormativity that they don't end up together, or whether they just their feelings for each other exist, but they, they're bi, so they did end up sort of actually falling in love with.
All right, so
their various heroes.
The story is called When Your Whole Life is on the Tip of Your Tongue.
That's it.
And the summary is Eloise Bridgerton and Penelope Featherington have been best friends for years. They're the only ones who don't realize that that's not all they are. And it's written by Blind Madness.
If you're interested, I think it's lovely, but I also would really love to see more, because I didn't realize that this would be my ship, but I actually am really taken by the idea that Penelope and Eloise love each other, and they're not just gal pals. Yeah. So let's move to our next question.
All right, so this question comes from listener Jay. And Jay asks, as Courtney Milan's Mrs. Martin's Incomparable Adventure shows, historical romance with older or even elderly protagonists is very possible. If you were going to design a love interest for Lady Danbury, what attributes would you want to give them?
My answer is absolutely influenced by the fan fiction that I read about Penelope and Eloise, where it suggested that Lady Danbury is gay and
100%. Lady Danbury is 100% queer. Mm-hmm.
And so it offered the idea of her as like the older lesbian in their life who kind of teaches them how to be part of the queer community. And I really loved that. So I think, and of course, Mrs. Martin's Incomparable Adventure is that's a WLW romance. So that's about two older women who find love together. And I possibly I kind of like the idea of someone who's a little bit more straight-laced.
Really?
Well, yeah, like someone that Lady Danbury can corrupt a little bit.
Oh, see, I went the other way because, I 100% agree. Like, the second this question came through, the only thought in my head was that obviously Lady D was a lesbian or bisexual. But I immediately had her paired in one of those grumpy slash sunshiny relationships where she's like straightforward and grumpy and like nasty to everybody, and she's paired with like an older woman who really loves flower arranging and regularly invites everybody over to their place for tea or for large dinners, and just loves having lots of people around, and just really loves being a source of friendship and pleasure to other people. And she and Lady Danbury like pretends to hate it and complains about it all the time, but secretly deep down she really likes it because, you know, it brings laughter back into her house, and she knows that on her own she wouldn't be able to like sort of cultivate these friendships around her. So yeah, so she relies on her partner to do that.
So I was imagining like a Holland Taylor Sarah Paulson kind of thing, whereas like Danbury would be the very smart and acerbic Holland Taylor type, and then she's dating this amazing woman who is like 30 years younger than her.
Okay, so you've gone Sunshine Grumpy with an age gap.
Yes.
Is that like, have I boiled it down properly?
Yes.
Cool.
Correctly.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm really thinking about this now, and whether I've made a mistake in going straight-laced.
Grumpy sunshiny for the win.
I guess because, like, I mean, like, I know that she's... I'm trying to think about, like, people in her life. Because she definitely... Yeah, you're right. Like, she definitely does... like to surround herself with sunshiny kind of people. But, like, they're people who are, like, very good at having, like, a pristine kind of public persona, and then, like, are a little bit, like, sly when they're comfortable. Like, they will get up to no good with her if they're comfortable with... Or they'll get up to no good with someone that they're comfortable with. And that, yeah. So I'm torn by this now.
We would want her to be happy and fulfilled and challenged.
Like, the way that I see it is kind of like if Lucy Parker's Act Like It with Richard and Lainey was a queer romance between older women set in Regency England. Lady Danbury needs a Lainey character to just, you know, humanize her. Remind her that, you know, other people around occasionally have feelings and she should occasionally think about them without really trying to soften her or without trying to change her. Just soften her a little bit without changing her, but also provide sort of that entree into other people so that other people sort of feel safe getting to know Lady Danbury a little bit better because Lainey loves her, and thus, you know, there's something in there to love, and they just need to go ahead and find it.
Just like someone who could look at her with like a fond, loving gaze, but also like, you need to stop now.
I mean, like, sidebar, if you guys haven't read Mrs. Martin's Incomparable Adventure, oh dear God, do I recommend it? Because they're elder of the two. She's got all this money, like she's real rich, and she's got a terrible, no good nephew who expects to inherit everything, and because he's expecting to inherit all of this money from her as like her next, like, her closest male heir, he has been like running around kind of running up accounts and treating people badly, and one of the people that he's treated badly is the younger heroine. I think she's like in her 60s, and so she goes to try and like get paid, and they decide to team up against the terrible no good nephew, and they're going to ruin his life together, and it just it's a damn ride. I love it.
Kay asked us our favourite scene of the series, and I think for me it is a scene in To Sir Philip with Love, which is shocking to me but it always just stuck with me as the scene when all the brothers burst forth into Philip's house. And it starts with, "It occurred to Philip, and he was pinned up against the wall with 2 sets of hands around his throat, that Eloise might have given him a bit more warning. He didn't need days, although that would have been nice, if still insufficient against the collective strength of 4 very large, very angry, and from the looks of them, rather closely related men. Brothers. He should have considered that. It was probably the best to avoid courting a woman with brothers. 4 of them, to be precise. 4. It was a wonder he wasn't dead already." And this scene goes on for quite some time, and it's chaos, but it depicts all the 4 brothers and their relationship to each other beautifully through the gaze of Philip, who's a bit of a stick in the mud. So I just love the energy that brought into that book, that really needed that familial energy, but also it is just so much fun to watch them eat and wrestle and be dickheads, but also be supportive of Eloise. So it's just chaos, and I love it.
I went super soppy for mine. It was funny. It took me a really long time to pick my favorite passages because there's a lot that I really love. And I think I was a little bit afraid to go too soppy as well, because I think I still have some of that inbuilt resistance about relying too heavily on the love aspects of romance novels. In my job and in my life, I spend a lot of time arguing for the value of why romance is important and why it deserves a larger space in the literary ecosystem. And I tend to sort of minimize the soppiness part of it because that's the part that gets trotted out the most often as the undesirable part or the unrealistic part. I have this little pet theory that people who don't like romance novels also don't like country music because they can't stand earnestness, and you can't go into country music or into romance novels cynical. It just doesn't work. But because we were celebrating our favorites, I decided to be super honest and super open and super soppy. All right, so here we go. "And then Penelope did the one thing that could break his resolve in an instant. She looked up at him, deeply into his eyes, and uttered one simple word. Please. He was lost. There was something heartbreaking in the way she was gazing at him, as if she might die if he didn't kiss her. Not from heartbreak, not from embarrassment. It was almost as if she needed him for nourishment, to feed her soul, to fill her heart. And Colin couldn't remember anyone else ever needing him with such fervor. It humbled him. It made him want her with an intensity that nearly buckled his knees. He looked at her, and somehow he didn't see the woman he'd seen so many times before. She was different. She glowed. She was a siren, a goddess, and he wondered how on earth no one had ever noticed this before. Colin, she whispered. He took a step forward, barely a half a foot, but it was close enough so that when he touched her chin and tipped her face up, her lips were mere inches from his. Their breath mingled, and the air grew hot and heavy. Penelope was trembling. He could feel that under his fingers. But he wasn't so sure that he wasn't trembling too. He assumed he'd say something flip and droll, like the devil-may-care fellow he was reputed to be. Anything for you, perhaps. Or maybe, every woman deserves at least one kiss. But as he closed the bare distance between them, he realized that there were no words that could capture the intensity of the moment. No words for the passion, no words for the need, no words for the sheer epiphany of the moment. And so, on an otherwise unremarkable Friday afternoon, in the heart of Mayfair, in a quiet drawing room on Mount Street, Colin Bridgerton kissed Penelope Featherington, and it was glorious.
That was lovely.
So I think this is Kay asked this. And Kay asked, what are we most looking forward to and or hoping for with the TV show adaptation?
Ooh, Kay, watch this space. Listen to this space.
Now is normally when we would do...
What would Danbury do?
This is where we imagine a character from another favourite book has written to the terror of the ton, Lady Danbury, to ask for advice. I also was sent, because my friends are fucking overachievers, guys, but they also don't know how to email an official email account. Love them, but dear Jesus. Anyway, what happened was we were sent a question, a WWD question, and yeah.
Hi, I'm Gabby from the Book Thingo podcast. This letter comes from Lady Serene Ravenshaw from A Lily Among Thorns by Rose Lerner. Dear Lady Danbury, I've reunited with a bit of an old flame, but things aren't going the way I imagined. He's hired me to do a job for him, which I was thrilled to take on because I need to pay back a debt I owe him. But now fortune has frowned on me again, and I'm desperate for his help. I'm sick of this uneven give and take. All I really want is to approach him as an equal, but I don't know how. What would Danbury do?
Well, first, I think Lady Danbury would be super impressed with the level of self-awareness of the heroine in terms of how the dynamics of that relationship are working. And I think she'd also be pretty sympathetic because it can be hard to make somebody change their mind about you when you've sort of been cast or cast yourself into the role of needing to be protected, I suppose, needing to be rescued. And certainly there'd be a worry in there about whether or not the person was actually in love with you or was just sort of rescuing you one more time. In which case, I think that the heroine is probably going to have to start figuring out ways to rescue herself, to stand on her own 2 feet. Like, maybe not, like, we all need help in this world, and asking for help is the sign of maturity. I should note, because I never asked for help and thus am super immature. But maybe participate in her own rescuing, try and do as much as she possibly can, or when she needs to approach him, say, I need your help, but here's how I'm going to help myself at the same time, and just give the situation a chance for her to, I guess, change his mind a little bit, show him that, yeah, she needs help in this particular case, but she's not helpless. And that would also give them the opportunity to spend some time together, which is really nice as well, in terms of trying to get to know each other and allow him the opportunity to get to know her outside of just her circumstances.
I think it's always admirable to have someone you can go to who is open to help you, but there is a fine line between helping because you want to and then, I guess, enabling. I'm also, like Kate, someone who really hates asking for help and generally doesn't. So I think that's always good to have someone outside of yourself that can call you on that bullshit as well. Not necessarily the person that's helping you, but to give you that outside point of view that's not about your needs or your fears, but to put it into perspective. But I think Kate's advice is spot on.
Well, I'm just going to add one thing, which is to say that it's worth double checking whether your perspective on that sort of the idea that you are taking too much is accurate, or whether your unwillingness to ask for help has amplified it in your own mind, and what is actually very reasonable expectations of somebody start to feel like maybe it's too much. Because
I feel so seen right now. I feel so seen.
I have an advantage. I do have an advantage in that I have read this book.
But it's like you've looked inside my soul, Ruby.
You don't know me. You don't know me.
Because I do think that a lot of us who are not great at asking for help or have very defined rules about who and when and why, and then they're rules that you would never apply to to a friend who needed help from you. So just sort of take a step back, reevaluate, and if it's just double check.
Okay, so I love this book because it has the perfect combination of a painfully sweet hero and a prickly, difficult to please heroine. Rose Lerner's books are always that beautiful reprieve from the traditional gender roles found in some other historicals.
Oh, I want to read it. I want to read it now.
It's straight up one of my favourite Rose Lerners. So that's A Lily Among Thorns. And like, yeah, I definitely read it.
Thanks, Gabby.
Thank you, Gabby.
Not an official question, but like a little bit of an exciting one that came through when we were soliciting questions. So I got a message on Twitter from B asking, did I see that Julia Quinn had taken a screenshot of one of my tweets and put it on her Facebook page, and I hadn't seen it, and I was really excited because it is straight up one of my most ridiculous jokes. All I had said was, what if the heroine in Julia Quinn's The Viscount Who Loved Me was named Susan instead of Kate? Susan B. Anthony. It's just like, it's not even funny, but I just love it. Yeah, and it made me happy. I had to explain it to different people, and like, and the fun thing is when you think that you're explaining, because it's not deep or clever. It's just it's pure absurdism. But yeah, so for some people I had to explain who Susan B. Anthony was, and then for other people I had to explain the B element in The Viscount Who Loved Me, and anytime I finished my explanation of either of those things, people would just be like, right. That's all for season 1 of What Would Danbury Do? We really hope you've enjoyed following along with us as we revisited this iconic series. Thank you to everyone who sent us questions. You have absolutely made our day. You can leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast app, and make sure you subscribe so you're all ready for season 2, whenever that happens, and any bonus episodes that occur to us along the way. In the meantime, we'll still be on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as @BridgertonPod, or send us an email at bridgertonpod@gmail.com. This episode was recorded on the traditional and unceded land of the Gadigal, Wurundjeri, and Bunurong people, and edited by audio producer Rudy Bremer on Gadigal country. Thanks for listening, and remember, WWDD.
What Would Danbury Do is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts.